What's up, StaleMates? Another special guest today. First off, I got to start off by saying that this guy, in my mind, growing up, seemed like the very first superstar kind of recruit out of high school. It's fun to watch his path throughout, college and then now into coaching. He's doing some big things. Eric Thompson, what's going on, Eric?
Hey man, good to see you.
Yeah. First off, before we get into your career, I want to say congratulations. You're a Bears fan. What is it? Three,
Yeah,
three and one. But I want to set the record.
four.
4-1.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I want to set the record straight before we get into that. Before we become friends, I want to tell you this is a cheesehead show. All right.
Gosh, you're
No.
so far from Wisconsin. That's the thing. You're in Pleasant Valley, so you're or Pleasant Hill, right?
Pleasant Hill. Yeah.
Yeah, you're closer to Chicago.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes you grow up with Brett Favre and you like greatness, so you're like, you know what? I'm
Uh,
sticking with that.
you know what? I accept. I accept. We had Brian Urlacher. I was more a defensive guy.
Okay. All right. I respect it. So today you're now coaching at the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, and then you're also help coach with David Taylor, right, at M2.
Yep. I have both those jobs right now. It's a lot of fun.
So how did you end up there from competing and everything throughout the years? You were recruited by Cael back out of high school. You went to Iowa State. You went to Grandview. You coached at Lehigh a little bit. How did you end up kind of where you're at right now?
Yeah, so just after I left Iowa State, just even after Coach Cael left, we were fairly close after he left, and obviously things didn't work out, and whatever, and I went to Grandview, and Coach Cael and I just stayed in contact, right? Just kind of here and there, just his funny sense of humor, his text messages and stuff, just kind of staying in contact with him in Cunningham. So when the time came for me to figure out what I wanted to do after college, I kind of just texted him and just asked if they'd be interested in hiring me. And he pretty much just said, yeah, move on out. So it's kind of crazy. So my wife's great aunt was a head of microbiology at Penn State.
Mm.
So, and she was like 70 years old. So I moved out here and lived in her basement for the first 6 months, right away in State College. So it was kind of crazy. And it was my first time that I'd been to Pennsylvania when I moved out here,
Mm.
but haven't left since. So we enjoy it.
I'm gonna give you the nickname. I know you got the nickname Gold Bear, right? Gold Bear USA. I'm
Yeah.
gonna give you another nickname, Mr. Dynasty. You've been part of three different dynasties, really. Well, if you want to count Iowa State, four. But Shell Rock, right? Shell Rock.
Yeah.
Then you go to, I guess we'll count Iowa State, so four different dynasties because Iowa State's had their run over the years. Iowa State. Then you go to Grandview, start the dang dynasty, and then you end up coaching kind of with the Penn State guys, which you're currently, doing their thing. Has there been a parallel between all the different coaches that you had? Is there like one thing in common amongst those guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like coming to the places and going to the places I've been, it's mostly, I'd like to think that I'm a good judge of character, but that's not always true, right? I think I'm just attracted to like good people, and that's one thing I'll say about Coach Caldwell, Coach Wickham, who's now the head coach at Waverly Shell Rock, um, KJ, Kale, Coach Mitchell. They're all great people on and off the mat. They do a lot for their athletes. They care a lot from start to finish. Really, I'm still all those guys I talk to at least a couple times a month. So it's those sort of changes and the difference it makes. I think that's what separates them, and I'm sure a lot of coaches do that, but that from what I can tell in my experiences, it's made a huge difference for me.
So I remember when you left Iowa State and you chose to go to Grandview, and at that time Grandview was pretty brand spanking new as far as it goes. Like that were you part of the very first national championship team that they had?
I was. So Omi and I were the first. Omi Acosta. We were the first two guys to win for Grandview to have multiple national championships that first year. And that was actually so I left Iowa State in like July, and I was like I didn't want to wrestle anymore, and I moved back to a Shell Rock, and I was working at a Target distribution center.
Hmm.
4 a.m. to 2 a.m. unload boxes off of trucks, and so Coach Mitchell kind of called me, and I'd known Mitchell from Waverly way back when I was a kid. I remember I was in like fourth or fifth grade, and he was running our youth practice, and I was about the same size as him, and we'd wrestle each other.
Hmm.
So it was kind of crazy. He called me, and I went on my visit, and he was kind of giving me his whole spiel that he gives, and I was like, yeah, I'll sign the papers today. I was like, just wanted to get out of Target.
Yeah, I don't blame you there. Did he try to recruit? I know you were the number one. Were you the number one pound for pound? I know you're the number one heavyweight out of your senior year of high school, but were you the number one pound for pound?
No, I think I was like 7 or 8.
7 or 8.
That was kind of before Flow started doing their pound for pound stuff.
Mm.
I'm not sure who did the rankings then.
I believe it
I'm
was.
trying to remember.
I believe it was Intermat. Maybe
Bryant, right?
was it Intermat?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that sounds right.
Did he try to? I know. So you know, obviously you were like, you know, pretty highly sought after. Did Coach Mitchell try to recruit you out of high school at all, or not even?
No, I remember seeing him as the spring of my senior year, and it was Mitchell and Grant Turner, who's with Nike wrestling. I met Grant on my visit to Iowa State, and they were like, "Well, when you're, you know, you don't have to go to Iowa State. You can come to Grandview right now and just, you know, be the starter or be the guy who starts everything for us, you know." And it was kind of crazy how that ended up working out.
When you ended up going to Grandview, where they're like, well, look who's here
Yeah.
now.
It was funny. So basically, you know, when I got to Grandview, so it was like Paul Reedy was like my guy who helped me with everything, right? He's one of the best people I've ever met in my entire life. I don't know if you've ever met Reedy. He's like one of the top 5 human beings on planet Earth, you know, and then Grant was my wrestling guy, and those two, you know, to go from where I was at the time, you know, personally in my personal life and stuff, it was a little wild then, and it wasn't conducive to winning a national title or being good at anything, right? So those two, man, they were terrific. And it was funny, I like kind of showed up and they were like, well, here we are. Let's do this, man. It's like, all right.
Yeah, that's funny. So nowadays you're helping out with David Taylor over at the M2, which you guys have a freaking amazing facility over there. That's got to be awesome to train there every day. And then, you know, the Nittany Line Wrestling Club, recently you guys started doing these rock fin cards, kind of innovators of the game with this. And then it wasn't much long after that we started seeing a bunch of other people in the wrestling world saying, hey, I've got a rock fin channel now. I got a rock fin thing now. Were you there from conception with this idea, or was this something that was kind of already in the works?
So Coach Cael kind of just said one day, like, hey, we're doing a card on Rockfin. That was pretty much it. And so we were all in. And yeah, M2's been awesome too, man. It's funny. Like, that facility is insane. You know, you think about, you know, Mark McKnight, myself, and David, we talk about like the places we trained at, you know, back in like the late 90s, early 2000s. You think about some of the wrestling rooms you'd go to, like it was like someone's basement with like these cracked mats,
Oh,
and you're
yeah.
like scraping your arm on them and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. These kids, man, we really get to help them, and it's in a really cool facility.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you guys try to remind the kids, like, hey, it wasn't always this sweet in this sport? You know, I was practicing, like, for me, my first wrestling room was under the bleachers of our basketball stadium or whatever. And I'm from Centerville, which is like, we got a pretty good history in wrestling. And the fact that we're still under the bleachers, it's like, dang. And then you see these kids now with these kind of facilities, you're like, man, it must be nice.
Yeah, you wanna tell them, like, dude, this place is so nice. You guys should be more thankful, but you don't want to be like the guy who's like, I walked uphill in the snow both ways. You know what I mean?
Right.
So he's trying to find the happy medium of like, well, I'd rather be crying here than in Uncle John's barn where no one cares.
Right.
You know, where I'm like, hey, it's okay, keep wrestling.
Yeah, absolutely. You said that Cael kind of just came in one day and it's like, hey, this is what we're doing. Is that kind of how a lot of things work, or is it more like a boardroom style where like a meeting of the minds, everybody kind of pitches stuff, or is Cael just like, this is what we're doing, and everyone's like, yep, that's what we're doing?
I'd say we're fairly democratic, you know, but it's like when your wife tells you you're going to do something, you don't really fight it, right? You just kind of say okay, and it's generally a good idea. So, you know, like, he is who he is for a reason.
Yeah. I think it's what I find interesting about this whole Rockfin thing that you guys are doing is Cael hasn't really been on Twitter in like years. People who have been paying attention for a long time, Cael used to be funny and hilarious on Twitter. He used to come in and kind of roast people. I think there's like he's quoted movies and whatnot. but all of a sudden when he needs it, he knows how to use it. And then even in between these two cards, that the first card that you guys have done, and then the second one, there was a gap where he didn't use Twitter for like a few weeks. And then, now he comes back October 20th. He tweets it one time. And then, he's kind of back in, I see him replying and stuff to people. Is Cael funny behind the scenes?
Coach Cael's like, he is classically like dry sense of humor, hilarious. You can't tell all the time when he's serious or when he's joking. So it's always better just to take him seriously. And then he'll get a little bit mad if you don't laugh at his jokes. He's like, well, that was a joke. And it was like, well, it's news to me. I thought it was serious.
Yeah.
But yeah, he is underrated funny. If he comes back to Twitter full time and he starts, going back and forth with people, I mean, people are going to laugh. I'm serious about this. He is hilarious.
That's awesome. So senior nationals was last past weekend. Did you make it out there?
No, I wasn't out. So we only sent two athletes. We had Jen Page who won, and then Kyle who sustained an injury. But so I do a little bit with Kyle. Mark McKnight does a lot of the stuff with our girls. We have Jen Page training, and then Jane Valencia training as well. So Mark does a lot of stuff with them. So there wasn't really any need for me to go if we're not sending a lot of people. But it was cool to see some senior level wrestling again, though.
Yeah. Was there any major takeaways that you saw just as a fan or, a coach as well? Did you see a lot of these guys and girls look rusty, or did they look like they've been, prepared this whole time?
I think people look good. It's if you looked rusty, I think that's kind of on you, right? I mean, at a certain point, it's like it's your career, so take it into your own hands. If you're trying to win an Olympic gold medal, it's not because everything's easy, right? It's because that's what you want to do. But I think it was good for a lot of guys, right? Like, so some of those guys who would maybe place, fifth, sixth, seventh, or eighth, and they're getting, some of those guys are getting in the finals. It's really good for their confidence, and it's good for them to have success and get back on the mat. So I think it's good for a lot of guys to be able to compete and get back on the mat and see what's going on with them. But I think you definitely saw some guys who shined, and shows that they were training and they were going in quarantine, right? Figuring it out.
In the UFC, they talk a lot about ring rust, guys who competed and then they don't compete for a pretty extended period of time and then they come back. We saw that with Gabe Dean. However, there really didn't look to see like there was any, let's call it mat rust with him. Do you think that's a thing, or that not really a thing in our sport?
I think you can work it out fairly quick. It just depends on who you are, right? I think wrestling, sometimes your timing's off, right? And that's when you have two guys banging knees, hitting heads, like guys are getting hit in the nuts and stuff, and you're kind of like, what is going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're drilling, and it just takes some time, to kind of get some of that timing down. But I think it can be worked out fairly quick. If you're on the mat once or twice a day and you're trying to work on these things and figure it out, then I think it'll get figured out. But if you're not putting in the time, or for whatever reason or whatever's going on, it can happen, right? You can be a little rusty if you haven't had the mat time.
Let's go back to this card that you guys are doing on October 20th, right? October 20th, I believe.
Yep.
It's on Rockfin. Make sure you subscribe to the Nittany Line Wrestling Club. If you're going to do it, don't do it through anybody else. What's it like putting this card together? Are you guys leaving up to athletes like, hey, go find your opponent, or we'll help you find an opponent? Or is it like, hey, we're going to find your opponent for you?
No, I mean, I think guys, they have guys they want to wrestle, and they have guys that they don't really care to wrestle, right? So trying to figure out how that works out for our guys, and trying to find the best matches for them while also making it sustainable, right?
All right. Well, I made a meme, the whole Jordan Burroughs, David Taylor thing. I made a meme. You're my guy. You've been a big supporter from the beginning. When I made that, I was like, oh, this is going to ruin my chance with an interview with you. This morning, David Taylor responded. Is that all fun and games, or is there a real like rivalry there?
I mean, someone beats you, you want to beat them, right?
Mm-hmm.
David wants to beat Burroughs. He wants to beat everybody. That's just who he is, right? He's a competitor. So if David could get a chance to wrestle him, I think he's going to take it all day, and I think he's much different than he was 6 years ago. And I know I don't enjoy wrestling him, so I can't imagine many other people do. So I think it is a little tongue in cheek, but also, guys want to beat other guys, right? I mean, it's just who wrestlers are, right? You don't. It's like when all these sports analysts talk about like, oh, he's one of the most competitive guys in the room. It's like, yeah, no kidding, right? You know,
Right, right.
it's a no-brainer that they want to beat everybody.
Do you think that kind of stuff is good for the sport? The the banter back and forth, or are you like, nah, that's for the birds?
I think I think if that's who you are, then that's who you are, you
Yeah.
know. But if that's not who you are and it's forced, then it seems silly, right? But I think it's not a bad thing. Nothing, you know, we get so caught in wrestling about like this is the way it is, you know, this is how we've done it for so long and stuff. It's a virus in the wrestling community to say like it's cut and dry, you know, just because that's the way your dad watched it or the way your uncle watched it. You know, it's we have our athletes have platforms now for a reason, right? It's not so they can sit in their house and train like lunatics and not get any love. You know, it's important for these guys to build their brand and to do these things.
Yeah, I think you really hit the what's the word, nail on the head or whatever. When it comes off, when it's a guy who doesn't, who's not really like that, if he's talking a lot of trash, but he's just not really that kind of guy, it's super. I think it's damaging to them because it comes off like, dude, we all know you're not that clever, you know. But when you have a guy that it works, then I think it only takes him to the moon, right? Like a Conor McGregor. So I think it's good for the sport, but it's not for everybody.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like the best you can only be yourself, right? And if it's not yourself, then it's disingenuous, and people are least attractive to people who are disingenuous. So you got to figure out who you are and be that person, right?
Absolutely. I want to, before we wrap this up here, I like to keep these pretty brief. What is in the water at Waverly? Like, you guys have been running things for a long time now. What's going on?
So, you know, it's crazy. So before I kind of got into high school, Waverly was hadn't really ever been good, right? You have Greenlees, the Greenlee brothers, but they were about the only guys who'd ever really found a ton of success, you know. So years and years of not great wrestling, and then we had, you know, it's basically just a group of crazy dads who were like, my son's not gonna suck.
Yeah.
And then it was just them constantly like how, you know, it was intense, you know, and looking back on it, it was a lot, but you know, results speak for themselves. And you know, once one dad comes along and they bring somebody else with them, that's how it works, man. I'm fully convinced if you want a successful high school program, it starts at the youth level with a group of parents who are very committed, right? Because one kid brings another kid, brings another kid, brings another kid, and then you have numbers. You know, my senior class, we graduated 12 guys. Two of them weren't starters, you
Mm.
know, but they were there the whole year and they were as important as anybody else to that team, you know, since we were in sixth grade, you know, bringing those guys along. So I think that's very important. And now guys are moving back to Waverly who've wrestled in college from that success, and they're running the youth program, they're running the junior high program, they're helping out the high school, and Coach Wickham has a great staff there. And it's just it's a commitment, you know. And Waverly's a, you know, a northeast Iowa town, but it's a little bit bigger than the rest of those places, and it's nice. And you have Wartburg there too, which is really really good for a high school kid. You know, like I was able to wrestle with a lot of Wartburg guys throughout the summers and stuff, and I know that made a big difference for me.
Yeah. Are you kind of using the same tactics, I guess, that you had back then now with M2? I know they're a little bit different, but is it a lot easier at M2 because you have a guy like David Taylor's name and brand behind it, or does that make it more of a challenge?
I think it's good. You know, it's David is you know, he's super passionate about it. You know, he loves it and he cares about it, and it's very very near and dear to his heart, you know. So me and Mark are doing a lot of this stuff, and it's nice to say, you know, hey, David is killing it. You know, he's here all the time. It's not like he's name only. You know, he is there running practices, helping kids, being involved. You know, he's above and beyond for a lot of these kids. You know, and I think your parents do the recruiting for you. So once you get parents to buy into the system of whatever you're doing, you know, and they tell other parents about it, that's your best advertisement, right? Is that and success, obviously. which we are now starting to come upon, which is very exciting. You know, some of our kids who were in junior high are now starting to have big success in high school. And it's vindicating for us, you know, because at first it was like, you know, they don't do this or that like other clubs do. So now it's a little bit different where, all right, we'll do whatever we're doing, and you guys can stick to what you've been doing for the last 30 years.
That's awesome, man. I love it. Thank you for joining me on the show here. October 20th, Rockfin NLWC. Make sure you subscribe to them. You guys are doing some great things out there. I love it. Keep doing what you're doing. Mr. Dynasty, the new nickname. It's probably not going to catch on, but I'm going to use it when I see you sometime. Thanks for joining me, man.
Yeah. Hopefully, you know, this year we can have the Olympic trials and we get you out here. Okay.
Yeah, let's do it. Hey, I'm a PA guy now. You know, last couple of weeks ago I was a big Iowa guy. Now I'm a PA guy. You guys need anything? Let me know. I'll give you my number.
I know I gotta get that stuff in the mail for you, so get rid of some of that Hawkeye stuff. I'm sure Coach Brands gave you.
Yeah, all
get
right.
it all, you know, working the good navy and white. Get going here.
Hey, I'll sell out, man. I'll be the first guy to admit it. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe. Follow Eric on Twitter at GoldBearUSA. Rockfin, everything. Thanks for watching, everybody.